Good afternoon, and welcome to today's live panel, ISO 20022, Standard of the Future. My name is Kalyani Bhatia. I will be your moderator today, and I head up the business innovation team at Swift. We are a group of pre-sales market experts that cover topics like GPI, ISO, and transaction management, and support the Americas and UK-Ireland region. A few logistics before we get started. First, this session is being recorded. Furthermore, we'd like to make this as interactive as possible, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions throughout the entire presentation by posting in the chat box at the bottom of the screen. Any questions that are posed will only be seen by myself and my panelists on our side. We will leave some time at the end of the session to answer as many of your questions as possible. Before I introduce our panel, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about what Swift is doing to support the monumental period of transformation our industry is facing with the ISO 20022 migration. As a quick refresher, MT message format categories 1, 2, and 9s are being decommissioned as of November 2025. If you remember, it was at Sibos in Sydney 2018 when Swift originally announced that we would move to ISO 20022 for cross-border payments starting in 2021 of November, with a coexistence period running for 4 years, reliant on the in-flight translation model to allow for interoperability between counterparties. The community asked us to delay by a year in order to be better prepared for the change. And then, of course, we got hit by COVID, which caused further delays. Swift responded in April of 2020 with a revised approach and timeline and a new strategy that was approved by our board in November of 2020, focusing on delivering instant and frictionless payments, account to account, anywhere around the world, underpinned by the rich data provided by ISO 20022, moving away from point-to-point messaging and instead moving to transaction management and orchestration. So why did Swift believe we needed to evolve as an industry and we shifted our strategy? It was really the 5 industry trends listed here that highlighted the requirement for change. The first one, upstream disintermediation, is caused by new platforms or other services trying to address friction in transactions. For example, trade, request to pay, securities. And if it's successful, they will change the way most Swift transactions are generated. Perhaps most importantly, we see direct competition. Client needs are changing, and there's little tolerance for friction or unpredictability. Fintechs and other disruptors are able to offer a better front-end user experience. Compliance continues to occupy resource and senior management attention. Mandatory changes are driven by regulators and MIs, including Swift, and this one particular hits me a bit hard. Prior to Swift, I spent 18 years at Deutsche Bank and can remember there was very little discretionary spend year after year once we accounted for all of the regulatory requirements and mandatory system upgrades. Finally, new tech is being rapidly adopted by new entrants. Leads to widespread disruption, but also opportunity to do things differently. The key strategic goals of our strategy to deliver payments smarter, faster, and better are the 4 blue quadrants you can see on the slide. In payments, we will unlock opportunities for our community, helping them strengthen existing markets like core bank-to-bank cross-border payments, while opening new opportunities for the future in consumer segments. We are aiming for instant and frictionless account-to-account transactions anywhere in the world, making international payments as simple as domestic ones. We will also intensify our focus on securities. The aim is to support all asset types, including tokenized assets, and to help the industry make processes like reconciliation and reporting more efficient and less complex. In the next few years, we will evolve our platform based on state-of-the-art technology, end-to-end transaction management, and rich data. Our platform will mutualize services such as pre-validation, fraud detection, data analytics, transaction tracking, as well as screening services, reducing costs that are typically carried by each bank individually. We will maintain full transaction data at the center, mediating between users and different protocols and formats to ensure that no data is lost, corrupted, or overwritten in the process. If I had to summarize our strategy, it's to build the future rails on which all financial transactions will run on tomorrow. So we're not on this journey alone. This slide really highlights that we have major Many major payment market infrastructures are already on board and live on ISO 20022, and many others will be live in the next couple of years. In fact, by 2025, more than 80% of our high-value payments volumes and more than 90% of value will have moved to ISO 20022-based platforms. So we've talked a little bit about why the need for change, what does our new strategy look like, but how are we going to deliver against this? And I really wanted to focus on three main pillars. The first one being rich data. As we saw on the last slide, many markets have already adopted ISO 20022 for high value and instant payments. And other major markets, including the Eurozone, US, and the UK, will migrate in the next couple of years. A key aim of our release one of the platform is to help banks navigate the complexity of the coexistence period from 2022 to 2025, when some banks and markets will have migrated to ISO 20022 and others will not. We need to ensure that all of our customers are able to talk and connect and exchange messages during this coexistence period. APIs. Additionally, we will be adding API as a channel in order for customers to seamlessly access payment data through the upgraded platform. As we move away from FIN, this channel will be offered in addition to MX and multi-format channels. How will we deliver instant and frictionless payments? We are not building a brand new system in parallel to the existing rails, but we are gradually evolving our very successful GPI tracking framework, which includes SLAs and ensuring speed and quality of processing payments. We will do this by transforming the SWIFT platform based on the concept of active transaction management. The platform will provide a set of common transaction processing services, such as pre-validation, sanction screening, fraud detection, and others, mutualizing these capabilities that today are typically provided and invested in by each financial institution individually. So a bit of a quick call to action for the community. What does that all really mean to me? What do I need to be doing to prepare for November 2022 to ensure a seamless transition to the upgraded SWIFT infrastructure as a first step to the ISO 20022 adoption? First, you must make sure you upgrade your interface to be able to handle multi-format MX messages. For those of you that are using SWIFT interfaces, I have at the bottom of the slide put in the release timelines for when that will be available, starting in July of this year. If you are using other vendors, please make sure you check in with them on their release timelines. These must be upgraded by November 2022. Secondly, you will need to upload your RMA bootstrap file. SWIFT is duplicating all of your FIN RMA current designations for FIN Plus automatically, so please take the opportunity to do some RMA cleanup. To benefit fully from ISO 20022, don't limit yourself to updating your interfaces and consider updating your back-end payment applications as well. In addition, you will also need to think about your sanction screening and archiving requirements. Will you need to process the entire ISO message to ensure your compliance obligations? So what is SWIFT doing to get the community ready, and how are we monitoring the overall progress? If I think about 2020, we were really dedicated on ensuring customers were aware of the ISO 20022 migration through a variety of free resources. We have SWIFT Smart curriculum training modules, ISO adoption briefing, little podcasts that you could listen to, ISO in Bytes newsletters sharing highlights from the community, CBPR plus standards, and testing of those standards on the Readiness portal. But in 2021, we have shifted our focus to ensuring customer readiness. We're monitoring progress on testing efforts on the FIN Plus service. There's loopback testing, and soon there will be testing with sparring partners available. Most importantly, making sure customers are planning those interface upgrades. We published a connectivity guidance paper in first quarter, which is our vision for how customers will connect to the SWIFT platform. That paper provides the information required to understand the options available, the pros and cons of each, to help you plan your implementations. That paper was recently updated in the last couple of days, so I encourage all of you to go and download a fresh copy, as there have been some clarifications from the first version. Finally, we are strengthening our customer outreach for the remainder of 2021. There will be a dedicated program on customer readiness. We'll have fresh content, new events and webinars, and continue to publish updated standards as they become available. So how is the community actually doing? This is my favorite slide. This is a snapshot of the entire global community taken from the end of April this year, and I wanted to focus on some of the numbers in the left-hand quadrant. So 30% of our customers globally are still not aware. So customers have not shown any concrete sign of engagement yet. 50% are aware. So those customers are making the first steps to evaluating the impact of ISO 222 and CBPR+. They've attended webinars, events, taken training, downloaded usage guidelines. 14% of the community is actually implementing. These customers are actually interacting with the messages on the Readiness portal, testing with messages on the translation portal, and some have even subscribed to the Fin Plus testing environment. 1% of the community has actually already started testing with ISO messages on Fin Plus. So what about Canada? So I do have the Canadian figures for you as well that you can look and compare against the global numbers. So we have 5% of the Canadian community not aware, so haven't made a significant concrete step yet. 62% are aware, have taken webinars, trainings, downloaded usage guidelines. 24% are implementing, and 10% have started testing. So great start, Canada. Swift has already been testing ISO with PayCan, but we need to do more. We need to get more Canadians implementing and testing. Last couple of slides. So we've talked a lot about these resources, but I just wanted to let you have a couple of pages of what all we have to offer if you still need more information and support for your ISO 20022 migration journey. We've talked about webinars and events. There's lots of curriculum on SwiftSmart, ranging from very senior high-level briefings to if I'm a project analyst and I need very detailed help with message specifications, we run the full gamut of curriculum available. There's also our very popular ISO 20022 for Dummies ebook that's available for download, the My Standards platform, the Knowledge Center, and in the right-hand corner, you'll see how you can sign up for our ISO Invites newsletter that's available to the community. We also have a program for vendors, and I've also at the very bottom of part of the slide, I've added our generic ISO swift.com email box if you have questions. That is manned 24/7 for your availability. And finally, last slide, I do have some active links back to swift.com on a lot of the different areas for the ISO 20022 program and further references that you can use to support your journeys. So thank you for that. That closes this portion of the presentation. Just going to close this out. Let's come back to our panel. If I could remind you to all come back off of mute. Why don't we start off with some quick introductions? Lisa, could you kick us off?
Absolutely. Just testing to make sure that you can hear me, Kalyani.
Yes, I can.
Excellent. And I was laughing at myself. We come into all of these sessions and this new way of working since the pandemic, and lots of instructions if you get disconnected, and sure enough, didn't I? So I managed to get back in, and I'm really glad to be back. So Lisa Lansdowne-Higgins, introductions. It's always really interesting when you try to do your own bio. My first reflection is I never thought I would have a full career in payments, and yet here I sit. So I'm with the Royal Bank of Canada, and I lead on their business financial services side, the business transformation and deposits team. And with that comes up with a lot of reimagining what we think this next horizon of capability will look like, especially in business financial services and in the commercial side of the bank. I'm also the Canadian representative, and I have the privilege of representing the community on the SWIFT board. So I'll pass it then back to you, Kalyani, for the next person.
Alex, how about you go next?
Kalyani. Yeah, I'm Alex Kade. I'm at TD Bank, and I'm the SWIFT and Cyber Industry Lead, with a focus really on payments modernization, ISO migration, and industry relations. I'm also involved with the Bank of Canada's RWPS, the Resiliency of Wholesale Payments program. I come from a technology background, having spent many years managing the bank's wire payments and trade finance platforms. And I'm also serving as the Canadian FI's representative on SWIFT's global platform user group, the PUG, which is providing input and guidance on development of SWIFT's new transaction manager platform. So back to you.
Terrific. Isak.
Yes, good afternoon. Isak Penttila. I'm the ISO 20022 lead in the modernization program at Payments Canada. My ISO 20022 journey started about 6 years ago, back then in Europe, in the SEPA project. So I've been part of Payments Canada for about 3.5 years. Very excited for the discussion today.
Great. Patrice, round us out.
So Patrice Roy from National Bank of Canada. So I handle payments, cash management solutions, and international solutions for the National Bank. I also sit on the Members Advisory Council for on Payment for Payments Canada, and so I've been majoritarily working on the commercial side of business, and but my responsibilities are all over the modernization of our payment systems at National Bank.
Great. So let's jump right into the first topic. In my introduction, I spoke a lot about how moving to ISO 20022 will benefit the industry by providing richer data. So my first question, and Patrice, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and this is a multi-part question. What is the importance of data in payments? How can data transform the payments ecosystem? How are you looking to leverage richer data as a community?
So thank you, Kalyani. Well, first of all, on the importance of data in payments is key. When you start imagining how having enhanced data around payments can really change our ecosystem, and we can all benefit from it, you realize we need to think of this from an end-to-end perspective. We need to make sure that what we're building can actually get people to have data from one end of the chain to the absolute other end. This change doesn't only affect technical requirements in some systems. It's a cultural and operational and deeply transformational change that will affect many parts, if not all parts of the payments infrastructure. The challenge lies in harnessing all these benefits that enriched payment data brings. If you remember, ISO 20022 brings richer and better structured data to payments, so there will be many opportunities to see value. For example, retaining full payment information would greatly simplify reconciliation transactions, which should lower costs, delays around payments. So obviously, payments reconciliation is not the most appealing subject at all times, but you have to keep in mind that recent studies by Payments Canada and EY estimates the 5-year cost of this to be around $7.4 billion to $13.6 billion just on low automated reconciliation. So you'll also see reduction in exceptions and errors in payments that could again impact costs and delays. Full information transparency should bring a lot more efficient regulatory compliance also. And the capacity to use much more effective data analytics. So all of these items show not only how richer structured data and payments will lead us to a much more efficient payments ecosystem, but potentially transform how payments are operated and used and how people participate in the payment system. You asked about what the community is doing to leverage richer payments. Well, as a community, we're hard at work right now, making sure that we're taking the steps to bring this value to our customers. We need to challenge the status quo, and we really need to think about all the possibilities this brings. And collaboration amongst the community is key to bringing this. It will ensure, if we're all from end to end stepping up to the plate and ensuring adoption of key infrastructures and initiatives like this to bring the value out to our customers. We're also making sure that these standards that we're adopting and the practices that we put in place are really key to harnessing this power and this power that payments data will bring.
So I love how you mentioned, Patrice, that this just isn't a technical change, right? That this is a cultural and transformational shift, and it's really about changing our mindset. So I love that comment. Alex, anything else to add?
Sure, yeah, a couple of points. I think, the increased use of mandatory and structured data will certainly enable greater STP within the bank processes, but via, faster reconciliation. And I think the key there is that faster reconciliation means the supply chain moves faster. So that's a big benefit. On the enhanced remittance information, that's really a benefit for STP for our customers. But the caveat there, I would say, is that rich remittance data still needs to be structured to be really a benefit.
Terrific. All right, for our next topic, I actually have a poll for our audience, and we're going to try out all of my moderator capabilities today. So let's see if I can pull this up, and I'll read it out. All right. So what is the biggest benefit your clients are expecting from the ISO 20022 adoption? Improved reconciliations, better liquidity, better tracking, better data and information, reduction in cost. And we will let the audience have a few more seconds to fill in some answers, and we'll come to the results. All right, we seem to have been stabilizing. So unfortunately, the audience won't be able to see the results, but I'm happy to share those with you. So actually nothing came through. So well, from what I recall, better data and information had 75% of the vote, followed by improved reconciliations and better liquidity. And I can't remember the percentage on that one. But Lisa, would love to hear what you thought about those results, and also, what do you feel the ISO 20022, how that will improve the client experience for Canadian financial institutions, corporates, and consumers?
Absolutely, and I do believe that the results that you were displaying, it was really interesting, because if you think about better data and you think about information, inherently your benefits would come through on improved reconciliation, optimizing things like working capital, improved tracking and reduction in cost. And that would be true across the market. For me, the top of mind is that ISO and structured data, they're game changers in the market. And I think that the market's been looking for this, and our customers have been asking for improvements and efficiencies, things like reconciliation, for a very long time. But to achieve that has really meant that we need to be able to start thinking differently about payment flows in particular, and how the data is associated with it. And it's really interesting, because as I was thinking about what Patrice was saying and what Alex was saying, I really know that data fuels our economy. And if we think about this movement to ISO, we really believe that this is about a paradigm shift in our environment. Some people call it that fourth industrial revolution. I know I've been in a few sessions very similar to this, and thinking about that notion of how AI and intelligence and data are really going to take this into a horizon, and we can reimagine things we never thought possible. I'm not going to quote too many things, but if I think back historically, and some of the other big pivots that have really changed your marketplace, I really think about the assembly line and the Ford Motor Company. But in there, it's about standardized processes. And in this case, with payments, for us, that's really going to come through with ISO. But what does ISO mean? I mean, we talk to our customers about it, but what we realized is that it's the data and the standardization underneath it that gives us that propensity for change. So imagine elevating your personal experience into a business experience now, and you can actually understand not only the characteristics and the behaviors of your customers, but who they are, because the personalization that will come through extended data is now quite possible. So if we think about the consumption for working capital, I reflect back on the pandemic, and what we saw in the early days from many corporate treasurers was this need and the urgency around the access to real-time information and the data, because they were making decisions almost hour by hour in the early days because of the unknown and the uncertainties. And we've seen aspects like that in our markets, where there's events that will happen that create volatility. So what do you think, from what do I think about this? I think that's a game changer. The ability to be able to offer solutions and businesses to be able to consume the data in a real-time aspect, but predict it and standardize. And no longer will we limit that to just our domestic borders, because all of a sudden this opens up globally. And the supply chains, to what Alex's point was in there. So, better tracking, better reconciliation, simplification of process, cost savings are all true. But it really helps us to also lean into the experience of digital. Digital is this landscape that's changing across the board. And the ability to think through straight through processing, in my mindset, I reimagine the end to end, because straight through processing still feels very process driven, but that's what you end up achieving at the end, because you're able to start to consume and potentially upload into ERP platforms. But what you can do with that data then on the insights of your customers, so the consumer experience changes, because you'll know more about those customers. You'll be able to predict it. So those analytical tools that will be available Now, some customers are going to be really deep in their knowledge of ISO, and their systems will retool that way. And others potentially in more your small business sector, they actually will just consume solutions that will be powered by ISO. And so I think it's an entire community shift. I'm really looking forward to it. And I think for us, it's about the art of the possible. And I think we're only just, at the tip of the iceberg about what we really can see in that change in the next 3 to 5 years with this capability coming to market.
No, totally agree. And for me, it's disruption creates opportunity, right? So think about in the pandemic, what's happened to the industry, move away from cash, move to digital payments. Absolutely. Anyone else on the panel? Any other comments on this topic?
Yeah, I would like to add that, I'm glad that the better data is the winner in that poll. I think data richness for me with ISO 20022 is two different things. First of all, we're going to have a lot of a greater quantity of data, but I'm fully agreeing with everyone else that the quality of data is actually going to be the most interesting part that comes with ISO 20022. And what I'm very interested in is to see the innovation that will come from that. I had the opportunity to be a judge at a ISO hackathon organized by BIS and SWIFT. And it was really interesting to see the submissions in that hackathon. And all of them really used the structure of ISO 20022 to come up with new solutions and new services. And it's going to be very interesting to see the future of all the new innovations and services that we maybe can't even imagine today.
Terrific. So Isak, I'm going to actually stay with you. Third topic, interoperability. It's a game changer for the Canadian market. How do you think ISO 20022 will support compatibility across the community?
So interoperability is, after innovation, probably one of my favorite buzzwords and benefits. Interoperability from a Payments Canada or a payments market infrastructure perspective is very, very important. That's one of the reasons why we picked ISO 20022 as being the underpinning standard for our modernized systems. So obviously we want to get to a place where we have greater interoperability, but with using an international standard, what's interesting is that we go from interoperability in the community to actually global interoperability. That's the end goal for us. And in order to get that, there are two things that we really need to do and that we're focusing on at Payments Canada and in the Canadian community. We need to stay true to the standard, meaning we need to implement it in its intended way. And the second thing is we need to work with not only domestically, but with our peers around the world to make sure that we're using this in a similar way as they're doing in the US, as they're doing in Europe, and as you're doing at SWIFT. So Payments Canada is supporting this, representing Canada in many communities, many market practice groups in the ISO 20022 community, real-time payments group, the RTPD, the high-value payment systems, HVPS Plus, just to name a few. And interoperability is going to be the key, especially now that we move into a world where ISO 20022 is becoming or will become de facto standard in the payments industry. And if we work together and if we work hard, we're going to get some great benefits from that.
Great. Any other comments from the panel on interoperability?
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I think one of the interesting points about how ISO is being deployed in terms of interoperability is that it's a global standard, but it allows local usage. So, there's a definition of global market practices, but there's still a basis there for further add-on, say, local data definitions to support domestic businesses or domestic business practices. And so that's very useful.
Great. So if I think about the Americas region, Payments Canada is one of the few MIs already on the ISO journey, and we certainly can't underestimate that effort of this migration. Isak, I'm going to also stay with you on this one. What are some of the lessons learned, challenges, and opportunities that you can share with us?
So lessons learned, challenges, and opportunities is going to take a very long time for me to cover. I'm going to focus on the lessons learned because one of the benefits with ISO is that it's an international standard and it has already been deployed in other jurisdictions. So as mentioned before, we work with our peers around the world and understanding what they have done, what the pain points were, and what we need to do. So in order to get a successful migration to ISO 20022, what we're doing in Canada is really three key things. This is not the whole recipe, but the top three things that comes to mind. First of all, the modernization that we're doing is an industry-led effort, and that's very important. And it's very important to have the first key, which is collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
So in our community, we need to have a lot of collaboration. That means a lot of meetings, a lot of long and sometimes painful meetings. But we need to have great collaboration, and we do have a really good community here in Canada. And the reason why we need collaboration, I think, it should not surprise anyone. But ISO is not going to affect one corporate client, one bank, or even one payment system in Canada. It's going to affect all of us and so many different institutions. So collaboration is for sure key, and I think that Swift can attest to that as well. You're doing a lot of collaboration as well. The second thing I want to call out has already been talked about. So mindset to me is very, very important, right? An ISO 20022 migration can be seen as a compliance project, but it really shouldn't. And for Payments Canada, it was never a question. It's not an afterthought. ISO 20022 is underpinning the modernization efforts that we're doing. So I think having the right mindset and looking at it for what it is, which is an opportunity to modernize and make it better. That's the second thing, to have the right mindset. And then the last thing, which you've already talked about, Kalyani, that you're doing and that Payments Canada is doing as well, it's education. Very, very important as we migrate and we move to ISO 20022 for so many different payment streams, that we educate people, because this is a big standard. There's a lot of change that's going to happen. And just as an example, a couple of weeks ago, Payments Canada had a vendor forum for our new high-value payment system, Links, where we talked about the application, and we educated the vendor community in what to expect, especially with the ISO messaging. So collaboration, having the right mindset, and doing a lot of education.
So I agree. I've heard collaborate now a few times already on the panel, and we fail together, succeed together, right? So this is a community effort. Lisa, any final thoughts on this question?
Yes, and sorry about my hand there. It's a way to reach the unmute button. I would have echoed all of the things that Isak had already said. In my mindset, the one that I would add is this propensity and this new way of working. When we think about business agility and we think about this principle of agile, if we can really lean into it, co-development also comes to mind. So one of the things we do really well in the Canadian community is we do come together as an industry, and it's something that we've proven in the past. They are hard conversations because we are changing business models and we're changing the landscape. But I would also lean in to say what will really make it successful in the migration is creating these new solutions. It's kind of utilizing those ideas of transformation and benefits for our clients, and how do we actually start reaching the end consumer with this and affect a change. Maybe it's just an experience change, and maybe it's something more deeply embedded with file download and some more structured data. But the realities are, how can we start to co-develop on that? And for us in Canada, I think we have this unique privilege in the sense that, we decided to go all in. When we think about our modernization efforts, this is about ISO data across all of our platforms. And we're starting heavily with our links migration on the high value side, but closely followed by any of our real-time capabilities. But that allows us to work with our customers, work with the different communities, work as an industry together to try to elevate the entire experience without having it to be fragmented. And so, even learning from past deployments of other capability, EDI always comes to mind for me. Yes, I've been in payments that long. But the reality is, how do you learn from that? And how can we develop once and create these frictionless, digital experiences for our customers that are really engaging and wow them at the end?
Great. So we do have one more poll for the audience to kick off our last topic. So let me start that one up. And this one is, what percentage of your customers are ready for ISO 20022? And we've split them up by quartiles, 0 to 25, 26 to 50, 51, 75, 76 to 100, and I don't know. So then we'll let the audience log their answers. So it's a bit of a battle right now. Panelists, as you can see, between I don't know and 0 to 25%. And then the next one being 51 to 75%. So how are we feeling about those numbers, panelists?
I think the I don't know clauses answer is very interesting. I think at this point it's perfectly normal to maybe not know how our customers are ready or what the state of their readiness is. But looking forward, I think that's one of the very important parts of all this, right? We've been talking about having an end-to-end solution, something that really brings value to your customers. Well, certain of your customers need to be ready for this because they'll need to do things on their end to really have that value come to them. Obviously, there's customers, and I think Lisa touched on that, they'll be consuming ISO without really knowing it. So they don't really need to be that ready for it. So it's an interesting weighting of those answers.
Any other reactions?
I would have echoed that. It's interesting. We've been running customer forums really since the onset of our modernization efforts in Canada. And then when SWIFT made the announcement for the migration, we recognized this, pent up opportunity, and we're really excited to dig into it. When we ran the customer forums, there was an expected outcome where many aren't familiar with it. But what we recognize is, to Patrice's point, we would actually deliver solutions that were enabled through this structured data that was coming through it. And they may never need to know what an ISO field standard looks like. So I thought that was, those were really important moments for us as we were trying to ideate around how we were going to take this capability and be able to really help transform the market.
Great. So we have one last question. If we look ahead, what should the community be doing now to ensure they're prepared for the ISO 20022 migration? Alex, would love your thoughts on this one.
Sure. Well, let me start with SWIFT's announcement in March 2020 of its plan to build a next-generation transaction manager platform. So this is designed to move us from the current point-to-point messaging approach to really end-to-end payments orchestration on a central platform. So the transaction manager, or TM, is designed to support SWIFT's frictionless payment strategy. Payments will be processed and pre-validated using SWIFT and third-party data. Optional services for data management and compliance are available directly from the platform. And with respect to the ISO migration, the TM will ensure that FIs can migrate at their own speed by bridging between players using different formats. And so ultimately, the customer experience is enhanced by providing upfront predictability through tighter rulebooks, SLAs, as well as greater transparency on fees and processing times. Following the announcement, SWIFT created a new user advisory group, the Platform User Group, the PUG, to evaluate and provide feedback on the platform. And the 20 largest countries and 10 largest banks by volume have a rep on the PUG. Our focus is end-to-end payment flow, so from initiation to settlement. We do deep dives on specific features like end-to-end integrity, exception flows. So we're working collaboratively with SWIFT to prioritize the platform roadmap and to validate key use cases and really build community awareness and momentum for this. What I really want to emphasize, though, is that it's important to understand that SWIFT really has two initiatives running in parallel. Number one is the migration from MT to ISO. So as we know, that starts November 2022. It ends November 2025. This is for the FIs, for the banks, and we, of course, have a 3-year period to migrate, during which we can choose whether to process MT or ISO messages. So number two, SWIFT is rolling out this new transaction manager platform to serve as a base for all of SWIFT services going forward. This also starts November 2022. However, SWIFT really wants to complete this rollout much sooner than 3 years in order to provide the benefits of the new platform to all customers. So SWIFT aligned the start dates, I think, as it saw the potential for the new transaction manager platform to assist with the 3-year MT-ISO coexistence period, in that once payments are captured on the new TM platform, every bank can then choose whether to process those payments, or how to process those payments without really worrying about what the prior or subsequent bank in the chain is doing. So in effect, this solves the weakest link problem of an MT processing bank truncating data in the middle of the chain. So I believe this is a great enabler for the ISO migration and coexistence. However, it is rather complicated. In the Canadian community, and I think more widely, this created some confusion with respect to what the November 2022 date means and how long that MT-ISO coexistence period will last. I think the key here is each FI's payment experts really need to think about how their cross-border traffic, both MT initiated and eventually ISO, migrates to the new TM platform, and whether that aligns with their internal systems modernization strategy. The other thing that's really become apparent through the PUG meetings is that we'll likely see a much faster take-up of ISO than I think we'd initially anticipated. Where initially many of us had thought or assumed that a gradual ramp-up of ISO traffic onto the new TM platform over 3 years, what we're hearing from the large US and European banks is that they plan to move to ISO payments very quickly. And so we may in fact see ISO traffic at 50% or greater as soon as the migration starts. The point here is that Swift will only build new business functionality on the TN platform. So to benefit from that, you need to move to ISO sooner rather than later. And I guess my last point is, remember, November 2022 is less than 18 months away. So it's time to move.
Indeed. Any other comments from the panel on this question?
It's Lisa. I thought what I might add to that is this notion of making sure that you've been able to secure and understand what investment that you're going to need to make as an infrastructure. So there's the technical investment that is needed. But I would also encourage to say, bring your business partners in early. So as they're looking at architecture and design, and they're thinking through the investments that are going to need to be made, what's your win strategy in this? You know, how is it that you can have an impact with your customer base and your community, and look at, you know, maybe even if it's simple as cost efficiencies right up front. If we're going to be able to reduce errors in processing because of standardization, if we're going to enable richer information through our ops centers, you know, how could you take advantage of that right off the bat? So I would just encourage an engagement with broader partnership across your institutions. And if you have a very close relationship with a partner bank in any kind of way, and they're not aware, I would also say, you know, point them in the direction of the website. I think, Kaliana, I did hear available 7/24 or 24/7, and so there are questions that can be answered, and Swift's there to help them as well. So that would be the only thing I would add there.
Yeah, and absolutely, and it is almost budget season, so I think what we're finding is within institutions, there are pockets of knowledge, but we could be doing more to educate our own folks at our institutions about what the program is, making sure sponsors are aware, and making sure those budgets get in now. So that ends our panel. Thank you, panelists, for a very lively discussion. We do have time for a couple of questions, and we have had a couple come in. So let me go through the first one. With ISO 20022, will correspondent banks still be playing a role, or payments will move directly from one account to another, irrespective of different regions? Who wants to take a crack?
We're still going to have correspondent banking. I think ISO 20022 is going to put a lot more information on those payments. It's going to help us see a lot, help traceability, know what's in those payments, but it's not going to give everybody access to everybody else's bank. So correspondent banks will continue playing a very important role in settling international transactions.
And they play a really important role in how you collateralize those payments, and you go across jurisdiction as well. You know, so ISO in itself, I think, enables the efficiency and better transparency, but that model still is very true today, and it is a cornerstone to enabling some of that, the global interoperability that we do need. What you can see, though, with ISO and some of the new Swift introduction of capability like Swift Instant, you can start to see where you might have alternatives to your more traditional routes, but still limits with some of the dollar amounts. So I think that's still something we need to solve as a global industry and as a domestic player as well.
Great. Let's look at the next question. Even though ISO 20022 provides the envelope for rich data, what is the expectation as to how much of its capacity will be used specifically in the first few years of adoption? Is the inconsistency in terms of using the standard only mandatory fields, not a risk?
Well, I was going to say, I was kind of looking to Alex because I think what he did provide was just a snippet into the volume. And what's been really helpful as a community as we did our outreach with Swift, and Alex has just been a tremendous advocate and champion on behalf of us as Canada as a community. We will see globally that 50% of the traffic almost on day one will be ISO enabled. Now, the mandatory fields really allow for your iterations and your notion about how do you lean into standards and be able to ensure that you're not unintentionally excluding people from a community. So how do you create inclusiveness and have that broad reach? I mean, Swift today, I think we're about 11,000 members strong-ish. And so with that trusted community that's there, what you want to be able to do is kind of get to that first horizon. So would I imagine, similar to what we've seen in any of the MT structures on standards, that new mandatory fields will continue to be introduced? Absolutely. But it allows the community globally and in Canada to grow together, as opposed to, maybe creating some friction points right up front that unintentionally, create some barriers for current members or current participants globally. I don't know, Alex, if you
Yeah, I mean, I agree there'll be some hiccups during that period of coexistence, but the ISO data, which will be not only offer us enriched data or the remittance data, the extra data, but it'll give us structured data, and the TM will give us enriched data. So I think, once you get better quality data, per the first conversation we had, you're going to have better processing.
Can I just add my favorite quote about ISO 20022, and that is, to migrate to ISO 20022 is not the end; it's just the beginning. So even though we start off with only using a limited set of benefits, we're going to get there. And ISO 20022 also has the benefit of being an evolving standard. It's not a static one; it always changes. And I'm not too concerned about not leveraging 100% from day one. We're going to get there.
Great point. So we have one more question in the chat. It's quite a long one, so I'm going to try and do it justice. ISO 20022 is really a good way to manage more data useful for a lot of treasury liquidity reasons, but to make it a success, it needs a regulatory decision for not only financial institution messaging exchanges. To reach the goals of ISO 20022, it has to be implemented at the bank to corporate connections, CAMP 53, CAMP 52, and bank statements, for example. What is the status in the Canadian bank at the moment?
I can kick off, and then I'll lean into my colleagues on the panel. The good news is that many participants in the community already are offering ISO standards. So a great call out here was the notion of the CAMT 053 and 052. I actually know many institutions in our marketplace actually already offer that as a standard and a delivery mechanism. And what this will enable us to do is to actually have a broader context of more information from parties that are participating in the payment exchange. And so where you might have gotten one payment that didn't have the extended data from a supplier or a partner, and it couldn't be transferred to the statement because it wasn't there, it didn't exist, now we will actually have the capability to do that. So many of us actually already are offering, but what this will do is ensure that we're aligned against the standards and that the payment flows will adhere to that. I don't know, Alex or Patrice, if you had a different perspective.
No, I think you've covered it, actually, from my perspective, Lisa.
I'd have to say the same thing, Alex. A great answer.
Great. So that actually are all of the questions that we have. That brings us to the end of our session today. Again, I'd like to thank my panelists for their participation. I'd also like to thank the audience to keeping this discussion interactive. I hope we've given you a lot to think about and some clear next steps to take you on your ISO 20022 journey. Finally, I'd like to thank Payment Canada for providing this platform for us to be able to engage with the community and talk about these topics. Stay safe. Hope to meet many of you in person at the next summit. And if you'd like to network, I believe there's a slide coming up to talk about Brain Date. Thank you.